money do I need to buy my first home or investment property, and what will it cost me to hold it over the long term? Well, joining me tonight to give his opinions is Rob Southwell, Managing Partner of the Sydney office of Pitcher Partners, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. What a big title. Very impressive. So let's start off with the basics. What do people generally need as a deposit, say, if it's for their first home or an investment?
Usually, typically, is 20%, but I mean the banks will lend up to 95%, being 5%, but that comes at a cost. So I think typically people are looking for 20%. Or 10% in certain deposit, in certain circumstances. So.
Right, okay. And there's still first homeowner grants around. I know, like years and years ago, it was talk of the town, whereas no one really hears anything these days, do they?
Yeah, there's still some available, although they're getting harder and harder to access given the value of property. So, that for example, in New South Wales, there is the $10,000 first homeowner grant, as well as some stamp duty concessions, but again, limited up to about, I think it's about 550,000. So they're getting very hard to access.
Right, okay. Now, obviously, property is getting more and more expensive, so even whether you've got 20% deposit or even 5%, it's still a lot of money.
Yes.
So where are you finding, say, when you're speaking to your clients, where are they finding the money? Is it tapping up mum and dad, or are they actually getting a few jobs and doing a bit of hard work?
Yeah, I mean, mum and dad or relatives are becoming more and more common, obviously, as property goes up. But, you know, obviously classic savings, trying to build up a nest egg to get you in the door. We're speaking to our brokers today, you know, we're getting family pledges or people securing loans as well. But, yeah, the most common way is through savings or through support for family. Yeah.
And again, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, look, property prices are unsustainable and it's harder and harder for people to get it. But I guess the generation before us, i.e. our parents, made a lot of money, so a lot of them are actually sharing that money and then passing it on, which then helps the next generation to afford the higher prices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a bit of a shift the way the demographics are going as well. You need to think outside the box. You can't always just do what your parents did, and I think there is a shift for the current generation to look after help their kids get into the property market, given that it is quite difficult. So.
Now, the government always wants their cut of things as well, so when it comes to buying property, what other costs do you need to take into account apart from the deposit?
Well, obviously the big one is stamp duty, and I think that impost is getting bigger and bigger. I think the first property I bought was about 350 grand, whereas the average property now is, you know, 800 to $1 million in Sydney, and the stamp duty on that is nearly triple. So in the old days, you would allow sort of 10% for your deposit and around 5%, but that's probably heading towards, 8 or 9. So stamp duty is the big one. And then, of course, your legals and so forth. And, of course, if you're not sure what you're looking for and you want to use someone like you know, becoming more and more...
That's not a cost, that's an investment.
It is, absolutely. That pays for itself. Other costs. But, yeah, the big one is the stamp duty. So...
Yep. Okay. Now, we might actually pull up a graphic to talk about some of the numbers to start with. So what are the main kind of cash flows and what's the property really going to cost you as we go through things?
Yeah, obviously, given that the rates have come down significantly now, you're looking at a typical cash flow on $1 million property for purposes of this. I think as obviously the values of properties are going up, looking at about 3.5% yield on average. You know, if you're fully geared, that's going to cost you about 4% in interest. So, but generally, the way I like to sort of benchmark it, on $1 million, you're probably going to be somewhere in the region of $15,000 per annum out of pocket. And then, as the graph shows there, so the net cash outflow after allowing various expenses and so forth is about $14,000. Now, I've also put in the effect of, you know, if you're on the highest marginal rate, you get the benefit of the gearing and coming back as a tax deduction. So, I mean, given the reduction in the interest rates, it's actually pretty reasonable from a cash flow to hold on to an investment property nowadays. Obviously, provided you can continue to afford the interest costs.
And that's the big thing, because a lot of our clients are saying, look, the rental income now is only 3.5% versus 5% before. But again, that break-even point, effectively, if a property rises at 10%, $1 million goes up 100 grand. If it goes up by 1%, it goes up by 10 grand. So really what we're saying there is whether your negative cash flow is 13,000 or 7,000, as long as the property market's rising by 1%, you're pretty much break even, which is not a bad investment.
Absolutely. I was thinking about it today, given that the rates have probably actually come down in line with the yields almost. When if you're gearing a property to say 80%, you could almost get break even, and if it's a new property, you throw in depreciation, you get tax deduction. So, the cash flow effect of negative gearing now is actually pretty attractive. People chase things for gearing, but at the end of the day, you've still got to fund the gearing itself. So I think, you've got to look at the total situation in that, given that where interest rates have gone, and will probably stay. I'm not an interest rate expert, but the way things are at the moment, they'll probably tick along, and and can get 3- and 5-year rates at still very low rate, very attractive rates as well. So you could lock that in, and sort of help predict your cash flow.
Yeah. So again, there's lots of people listen to the news. Listen to the media, which of course they should do all the time, but they listen to their friends and family and various different rumours. But you put pen to paper, you actually look at those physical numbers. That tells you the whole story.
Yeah.
So stuff the rumours, stuff what people say about rent returns, look at the actual numbers.
Absolutely. I've got a few properties, and I have a spreadsheet, and I just plug the numbers in, and it's almost to the point now when you see a property, what it's asking, get a feel for what it's renting for. Pretty much in the back of your head how much it's going to cost you. On a yearly basis, and I break it down to monthly cash flow amount, and quite often it's cheaper than buying a Corolla, leasing a Corolla year on year. I know which one I'd rather have. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that. And again, because the negative gearing portion of this is reducing significantly, the growth that you need to be in front is less, putting less pressure on having that available. But obviously you need to give yourself room to move, because property, if you look at over the last 20 years, it fluctuates. It doesn't always go up, and you've got to actually structure yourself so that you've got buffer there, that if it does go sideways or down for a while, you can continue to fund it.
And obviously you don't have to be a genius to realise that at some point interest rates will rise.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, one official cash rate of 1.5% is the lowest in my life, or it's the lowest ever. And anyone who thinks, well, they might go down again, sure, but if you're a property investor or you're looking to invest, you'd be pretty naive to think not to look at taking advantage of that and locking that down for as long as you can to give you certainty.
Yeah. So. And again, if you're not really into these numbers, a mortgage broker should be able to get these bases together, and if not, go and see an accountant, because it's peanuts in the grand scheme of things versus getting it wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, like I said, in that graphic, there's 4 or 5 things you've got to worry about. So you can, if you've got a fundamental grasp as Excel, you can do it, or you can do it on the back of an envelope pretty easily. So,
Again, the numbers are on the screen, so take a photograph or video it or something like that to get the rough idea.
Screenshot it.
Yeah. So that's cool. Now, how do most people fund that negative cash flow?
Most people will fund it out of their income, so people on higher incomes that into their living expenses. I think you see more and more now for people that have multiple properties are actually structuring them so that they can almost capitalise the negative gearing effect. So from a day-to-day living expense, it's not costing them anything, and if your properties are continuing to rise, that's a great way to do it. But I think the most common way is out of cash flow. I think you need to be very cognizant of that with your lifestyle, though, and understanding, I'm going to have this, I'm going to have it for 10 years, will I be able to continue to do it? So. Because
it's one thing having one property and owning $7,000 in cash flow, but if you've got 10 of them, it's costing you $70,000.
Exactly.
And if interest rates go up, it might cost you $200 or $300. So
that's right.
You need to get more sophisticated advisors when you're buying multiples.
Yeah, and you also need, the more properties you have, the more buffer you need, because I think it's important to make sure that you can. You've got the levers at your disposal to make sure you don't get yourself into trouble. And also, too, you want to live a life. You don't want to be a slave to, if your income dries up for whatever reason, you don't want to be a slave to a rental property. So you want to be able to structure yourself for that rainy day and still live your life.
So look, while it does still look positive, all those numbers, then obviously get everything double-checked with mortgage brokers and with accountants before you make those financial decisions. Anyway, now it's time to jump to Tom Panos. He's going to tell us what properties are hitting the newspapers this coming week. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Chris. How are you going?
Very good, thank you. Very good. Let's jump into property number 1.
Okay. In St Ives, just talking to Danny Bernardo from Rain and Horn at Double Bay just before coming onto the show. A nice, generous block of 920 square metres or thereabouts. It's beautifully situated in a cul-de-sac. It's in St Ives, as I've said, and it's